Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining the Alliance of Women Directors for this discussion. My name is Sacha Smith, AWD Board Officer, and I'm thrilled to have a conversation with the incredible Emmy-nominated director, Millicent Shelton, about her work on Lessons in Chemistry. The show is nominated for 10 Emmys, currently streaming on Apple TV+. Millicent, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I am thrilled to be able to speak to you today.
This show is, besides being a fan favorite, this show is so incredibly layered with themes. I mean, I feel like this is one of like the deepest onions right now for a limited series. You have gender biases, economic disparities,
Yeah.
racism, social tension, breaking the glass ceiling, motherhood, what it means to be a single parent. All of this is wrapped up in science and chemistry, family, the love for food. And as Lee Eisenberg says, it's a love story, and it really is.
It
I am
it
so
really is.
curious. What was your first impression? We want to hear your first thoughts when you got this and just how you went from there.
Well, it's interesting because I was first, the project was brought to me by my reps. And I was at first intrigued because they said it was a limited series with Brie Larson. So I was like, I love Captain Marvel, so I want to work with Brie Larson. And then they sent me the pilot episode and episode number 2, the scripts. And I read it and I was like, they were really great. And when I finished episode 2, I wanted to know what happened next, which is the most important thing, for a new series. It's like you want to know what happens next. And so then I did a Zoom with Lee Eisenberg and was thrilled meeting him. And I just knew that I wanted to work with him. And then the last hurdle was meeting with Brie, and it was so easy. You're like, oh my God, it's Brie, and it was just me and Brie on a Zoom, and she's so normal is the best way to talk about Brie. Brie is so normal and so relatable and so easy to talk to. And it was just like we had been friends for a long time and it was easy. So that really, really made me want to do the show. And I was thrilled to get the episodes that I got. And then I read the book. And once I read the book, I thought it was amazing. The choices that Lee made to stray from the book, to embrace themes that were relevant to today. And I think one of the strongest choices that he made was changing the Harriet character to an African American woman who was in the same age group as Elizabeth, and then to incorporate the whole West Adams movement, or protest. I thought that was really great and timely, and it goes into, when you're saying it's a love lesson, it's a love between these two women. It's a love for your home. It's a love for family, all types of families. And there were so many themes, and I think that just added to one of the themes. So he added another layer to the onion that was already in the book.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. I did not know those a couple of things, so thank you for sharing that. Um, yeah, Asia plays such an incredible, and she's nominated as well for Best
Yeah.
Supporting, and Brie is nominated for Lead. That their dynamic and their sisterhood that they have for each other is just so prevalent throughout the show, and how that has built. And your episode, well, you directed 2 episodes, but the one that you're nominated for, Poirot, which is so that I feel like there has a lot of climaxes to it. We get to, and
Yeah.
we'll touch on those in a little bit because there's some very heavy themes in those. But I did want to first talk about the locations. I think I did a little rough count, and I'm a past 15. I mean, we've got driving shots, freeway shots. You've got houses inside and out, a studio, a church, a tent. You've
Yeah.
got law offices, reverend's office, a grocery store, a
Yeah.
library, and then some. And all of these
Yeah.
settings and their beautiful tone. I would love to hear some of your thoughts on all of these locations and the time that you made to make all of these work so flawlessly.
We we scouted locations for a very long time. So part of it. But the production designer, Kat, was just amazing. And I loved working with her and what she did. And so, she had done her research and knew what, the buildings and the architecture of that time period was. In the Perot episode, there were two time periods. We did 1932 and we did 1959. So we actually had to find buildings that worked for both periods of time. And there was a neighborhood that we found that's actually kind of it's like a museum neighborhood. I don't even know what part of town we were in. And they had moved all these historically correct homes from different time, Victorian homes, and they had several from 1932 that they had in this neighborhood. And so the inside of Elizabeth's father, outside and inside of Elizabeth's father's house was one of those houses. And then the church, I think, was originally written for inside of a tent both times. And we were like, we'll do a tent once. But while we were walking on this property, we saw this church. And Kat and I were like, because Kat and I we just got really hyped and we were like, let's look at every building in this way, even if it's not the right time period. And we saw this church and we were like, we want to go in there. And they're like, the ceiling's falling in. It's not, and we're like, no, we want to go in there. And as soon as they opened the door, we were like, I was like, I'm going to shoot in here. And Kat was like, yes, we're going to shoot in here. And we pitched it to Lee. So that's how we got in that big church for the first, I think it's the first church scene, is this beautiful church with like a semicircle dome. And actually they walk up on the outside of it and we put the period cars and it was just wonderful. The place was like filled with dust and it was just fabulous, but it had all the texture and it was just lovely. But I love doing period pieces because it's like you can walk by this architecture every day and not really pay attention to it and not really realize that I'm walking past something that's historic until you start like going, oh, I need to look for a specific type of architecture. So it actually reintroduced me to Los Angeles in a totally different light. Like you look differently. The grocery store is in East LA, I believe. And it actually looked like that. We barely had to do anything to it, but you just kind of go past it and don't even really notice. And once you add the cars and a little bit of signage, it's amazing how you transport this place that's in, the current century back into the 1950s or the 1930s, depending on what we do. So that was just amazing. And we really spent time trying to find things that worked and made sense. We scouted for where the car's driving and the tree outside of where the revival tent, that's a park right in the middle of Hollywood. And I saw this big tree and I was like, kids sit in trees. And I was like, where do you put the kid in the tree? And we had a stunt coordinator like behind the tree holding her so she wouldn't fall. But I was like, I'm gonna put the kid in the tree. Why not? I was like, why not sit like underneath the go in the tree? And it was we had a really great time finding locations and we always had an eye for authenticity. So we wanted to make sure that it was authentic and we didn't have to do too much to it. But, we made little changes here and there. But for the most part, we tried to stay as authentic as possible and find things that worked in camera with just little cheats here and there.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, you've done such an incredible job at it because those flashback scenes or the scenes back when the family was kind of this traveling family, you feel that. I mean, I feel like we're in the Midwest, you get that her dad was this, kind of vagabond, so to speak, traveling through, spreading the word, and the tree is a brilliant idea because kids love to climb trees and it makes so much sense. And you also get her innocence of, who she was before, she became this full-on
Yeah.
adult. And you see that in those characters and it's such a great job. Um, one
What was
more.
crazy was what we did not expect for it to rain on those days. It was a torrential
Oh,
downpour in Los
just
Angeles.
added to the location even more.
Torrential downpour, and I was standing on the road because it was when they were driving the car. It was actually an asphalt road, and so the greens were putting out leaves, and I was like kicking these leaves for hours because it was like a torrential downpour, and everyone's hiding, and I was in the rain with my parka covering the road with my foot with all this stuff, and I was like, we're just gonna shoot in the rain. It's gonna be fine. And we got in the grip tricks and we're following behind, and I'm riding on the grip tricks next to one of the key grip. and we're following behind the car that's like, of course, every time you get a picture car, it works until you put it in front of the camera. And then it doesn't work. So it had like broken down and they like rigged it and it was like starting to drive. It's like, okay, we have to shoot before it and it's pouring rain. And so we get the shot. And then I look over at the key grip and he's covered in mud. And I was like, yo, you're covered in mud. And I had on a white parka. And he looks at me and goes, me, girl, look at yourself. I had mud from head to toe, and my white parka was completely brown. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even notice. And it was funny. And so that, I mean, I was determined to put her in the tree anyway, but then we had the umbrellas. So we were like, well, she's in a tree, and they have umbrellas. It's great.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, I would love to shift over to some inside locations, more specifically the set within the set. So we have, the show itself, Lessons in Chemistry, but then we have Supper at Six, which is just gorgeous. The set is incredible. I'm so curious how you approached, filming, getting the shots, because we have the TV show Supper at
Yeah.
Six, getting the shots that then get, put into the TVs at home, back in the 50s. And I'm so curious how you approached some of those shots within shots, and what
Yeah.
was anything real, was anything hidden, did you grab stuff while you were already set up within one while you're doing something? I would love to hear how you went about all of that.
We had three cameras that were really recording her on, and I can't remember what. They're the video camera bodies they were the real units that we were shooting, they were shooting. And
Okay.
then we had other cameras that we had to shoot for the footage that was supposed to represent what they were shooting so that we could air it. So it was like three layers of what you had to film. And so I orchestrated where the three on-camera cameras were and what they were seeing, because a lot of times I used that monitor as a transition. So I would go off, like they'd be doing a close-up on Elizabeth, and I'd go off of their monitors close up and then pull out, and it was like, a full shot on her. So those were all
Brilliant.
they were all
These shots were brilliant.
yeah,
And I was
they were
just,
all prearranged. Because my episode was the first one that really the episode five, I did five and six. Episode five was the one that was the first time that lived in Supper at Six. There was a little peek of
yeah.
it in the pilot, I believe, but then I had literally I shot in that location for I think it was a week, every day for a week, and myself and Zach and the DP and Chris the AD, we spent 2 days blocking and trying to figure out, where do I think Elizabeth would go? Where would all the people go? Where would the extras go? What makes sense? And to really think about story and character. And Supper at Six was a character. And I wanted it to feel alive, and I wanted it to have a purpose in the storytelling and how we looked at Supper at Six. Because I didn't want everyone to, every time we go back to Supper at Six, it was the same shots.
Yeah.
And so we kept thinking about, okay, we're back in this thing again. How do we look at it differently and always support story and character, not just do, crazy funky shot just to be doing a crazy funky shot. It's like do something that supports story and character. And I think we succeeded in doing that. It almost made us crazy. Like by the last day, I was stir crazy. I was like, oh my God, I have to get out of this like set. But it worked out, and it was, a testament to good planning. And I think that it felt alive and new every time we returned to it. But
Yeah.
it was mind numbing when we were shooting it.
Well, you definitely nailed it. And because it's like, you're right, like as an audience and as a viewer, you do such a great job even setting it up. Because I think in episode five, you're sitting with the audience feedback people, right? Like they're talking, they're like, what did you think of the show?
Yeah.
So from that moment, you're almost like, oh, I'm a part of this audience. I'm watching this
Yeah.
show get developed too. And
Yeah.
then you continue on that journey. And so it definitely feels like a character within a character as an audience
Yeah.
member and as a viewer. And so and then as that show builds, and then you obviously have Brie Larson playing Elizabeth Stott, this incredible woman, this different kind of hero, I should say, in this
Yeah.
show.
An
What was it?
anti-hero hero.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, she's just so, oh,
Or an antisocial hero, I should say that, an antisocial
yeah, I was
hero.
gonna say, yeah, she
Oh,
anti-social.
very social. She's social with people she knows and loves. So it's like,
Yes,
okay,
yes, very direct, but very to the point. And
yes.
what was the collaboration like with Brie, and how, if you could touch more on, anything that you would want to let us know or what we can know, because it's such a joy to watch her. And she's in the beginning, I think in the very first episode, you get that she's got her Piccadillys, but so does he. And then you watch them
Mhm.
fall in love, and then spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't watched the show, some tragedies happen, and then we
Yeah.
continue to just feel for them through the entire show. So, yeah,
Yeah. My
to
block picked up after she had given birth, and it was the beginning of her relationship with her daughter, when her daughter wasn't an infant anymore. Her daughter was a young, not a toddler, she was a
7, I
preteen. Yeah, 7. What age would you call it? A kid. Her daughter's just a kid, you know? And so it was really mining that relationship on who this woman was now with a child who she'd spent 7 years with, and what that meant to somebody who was really sort of very introverted. But it's hard to be an introvert with a kid who's really precocious and smart. And she was played by a really precocious and smart actress, Alice. So it was interesting to go on that journey, but working with Brie was wonderful. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better person to be the number one, and I feel like she was my partner in crime. And what I love about Brie is she's super smart. She's super connected. She was the most connected outside of, I think, Lee, to the material, because she had shepherded, into fruition as a producer. So she knew all the material, and she was aware of all the changes that were, made to the book, and why. She knew the character really well. But what I love about Brie is a collaborator, and she trusted me to be able to say, okay, I see this happening. Why don't we try this? Why don't we do, there's something magical happening. And I like to focus not so much on the words. I actually like to focus on the nonverbals that happen in the acting. And it brings more life to me to the words. It's like a twinkle in your eye. It's the way that you say something. And once an actor does it, I'll go, oh, now I hear and feel something different. Let's lean into that. And what I love about Brie is she's game to do that. And even if it's a wrong choice, and I would say to her sometimes, I don't know, I could be wrong, but let's try a take where we like play it this way. And she'd go, okay. And she'd do it. And then we talk about it and go, was that better or worse? And sometimes it'd be like, yeah, that's better. Let's keep going that way. And sometimes it'd be like, no, that didn't feel right. Let's go back to what we do. And she didn't like get pissed or anything like that. She was open to the collaboration and the exploration. And I think that's why she's a really wonderful actress. And you get such amazing performances, because she's an open vessel to try things and to experiment with the character to find a deeper truth. And that's what we're all going for. And I appreciated that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of actors and having those moments of stillness, you have two incredible scenes that are heart-wrenching and but very impactful. We have the sit-in protest that gets disrupted by the police, and then we have the loss of the brother, which we have the warning at the beginning of the show for if anyone has dealt with or is, to prevent suicide. um, you have moments of stillness in both of those scenes. How did
Mm-hmm.
you approach, and when did you know how long to hold on those moments, or how to build those moments? Because both of them are just gut-wrenching, and tear, fighting. It's crazy that 75 years later within the show, we're still fighting for the same things. We're still dealing with the
Yeah,
same stuff. Um,
equality.
and yeah,
Equality, not only for women, but for, people's sexual preference, and for, ethnicity. It's like racial discrimination. I mean, it's kind of sad. We're still fighting for the same things.
yeah.
Um, what I when I what I loved about this book was that it really drew the line, it connected all of those things. It's like
Yeah.
discrimination is discrimination. Inequality is inequality, whether or not you're being treated poorly because you're a woman, a person of color, or because you're gay. The hurt is still the same.
Yeah.
It is the hurt of being treated poorly because of something you cannot control, and it's unfair. And I think that this series was like, this is the thing that brings all those people together, because hurt is hurt for that reason. And you can't say one is more hurtful than the other. They all hurt,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's the understanding that you get between the two friends. It's like, look, you know, when Elizabeth and Harriet have that conversation in the kitchen, that's when they become true friends, because Harriet could actually tell her the truth and say, you can't really be my friend if you don't understand my
Yeah.
pain. And it's a pain that you should be able to understand. And to Elizabeth's credit, she does understand. She understands hurt. She understands the pain of being discriminated against unjustly. And in that scene, in the protest, you know, that protest actually happened. And we had a historian that I talked to, and I did a lot of research. I could not find any photographic evidence of it.
Hmm.
So I ended up doing research on what would be historically accurate at that time for the sit-in. And then I just dreamed and was like, okay, this is based on what the research was, this is what this would have been. And we found this underpass near LAX, and we were like, we can make this look like, you know, they're constructing the highway over it. And you know, we bought in a lot of equipment, and I figured out a way to block it and to give it motion. But you know, the most important thing was what happened with the actors inside of it. You know, that the scene had to be about the humanity, and the heart of that scene is Harriet. You know, that you feel, we've seen a lot of shows where we've done race riots.
Yeah.
I think this hits people in a way that was super triggering, because you lived through Harriet. Harriet was somebody that you knew, and this whole thing was experienced through someone who was your friend, and she's the audience's friend too. And you saw the hurt and the pain that she was experiencing, and her loved ones, and Elizabeth is experiencing. And you know, at that moment, we had to make a choice. You know, do we water this down and make it, you know, PC, or do we do something that is as authentic as possible and it can be triggering? And I am not a director who likes to just do pain for pain, any type of pain. I think if there isn't a reason for it, we don't need to do it. And there was a reason for this, because there was a really good point. So then we chose to be as authentic as possible and not water it down, because if we water it down, then what's the point? You know, we want people to understand what this is, and it should never happen again. So, you know, when we first did it, the police officers were being really gentle.
Mm.
And I was like, guys, you can't, you know, this is not the reality of the experience that happened. And, you know, they felt terrible, but I was like, you got to just drag them. And then the extras were like, well, I would fight back. And I was like, yeah, you can't. You've got to sit there. And take after take, I was like, nope, gotta go, you gotta go harder, and you have to go less. And it created this dynamic that, like, before my eyes, we were like transported back in a different time. And then a lot of what you heard was not scripted. You know, people just fell into character. And the lead police officer, he later told me, he didn't tell me when we were shooting, but his mother was a freedom fighter. And after she saw, you know, the cut, she was in tears, and he sent me this email, and I was like, oh my God. And he's like, it took her back, you know. But you know, and he was like, okay, I'm gonna go there. And he went there, and just seeing how they like dragged away, you know, Harriet's husband, and he just had to sit there, and they like pulled him past, and she was sitting, and it just all started building up. And then when the stunt woman started to scream, originally they threw it to the ground, and I was like, that's not enough. And then I had told her, because Asia mentioned this in the panel, that they were so traumatized. But I told the stunts, I was like, yeah, you got to do more. And they were like, well, we're going to stomp on her. And I was like, okay. And she was a stunt woman. And she was like, yeah, that's fine. And so they threw her down right in front of Asia and Brie. And I had forgot to tell them that the stunt woman was going to be thrown down and stomped on. And so they were like, that was legit when they were like, what is happening? She was thrown in front of them. And then she's screaming and adding all this ad lib, which broke my heart. I mean, it just broke everybody's heart, but it was so appropriate. Asia came to me and was like, what is happening? That poor woman. I was like, she's a stunt woman. She's fatted up. But it was, it was really traumatizing. At one point, I turned and looked at the crew, and the whole half of the crew was in tears. And it was like, oh, we've accomplished. I was like, okay, I don't need to push anymore. We've gotten to the point where it feels authentic because it's triggering to everybody, and that's what it should be. And I didn't want to push it past that. I wanted it to just reach the point where it felt authentic, and
Oh, it
then
did.
let
It
it just
did.
rest. Yeah, you didn't want to really push it past that and then get into like, hyper pain. I don't want to go hyper pain. I wanted to just touch on what was realistic and triggering.
Yeah, and I mean, and I that's so true to your testament of it's not always what's said, it's what's, what you feel or what you see or what's unsaid. And
I know.
it's just it sits, and
Yeah.
it's as heart-wrenching as it is to watch. It's important that we watch these things and we learn, because we
Yeah.
still are so literally right where we were. Even though we're watching a historical piece from 75 years ago, we're still here and living it, and it was very beautifully done. And then on
Yeah.
the opposite end, you have this scene, when the brother shoots himself, and then you have the
Yes.
coldness of the father of like, well, he made his choice. And it's just that
Yeah.
is just goosebumps in another way, because of how another callous way people can be, but then the mother with so much hurt and pain. And it's just, wow, like these two scenes to be in one episode for what you had
Yeah.
done. And please feel free to touch on that scene and how that one went, and directing actors in something with crew so emotional. And was that, because this other one was a very large scene, right? You have a big crowd, you're out in the
Yeah.
open, and then this one feels a lot more intimate and maybe smaller
In a
crew.
tight
You,
little
yeah.
hotel room. Yeah. It was a real location, so the room was
Mm.
super tight. Um, yeah, that one was because the story of Elizabeth's brother John was in flashbacks. I felt that it was, and you just got little snippets of him. I felt that it was super important because to me, everything has to be humanized.
Yeah.
Um, if he was a caricature of what her brother was, I don't think it would have hit as hard. So the focus was on what can be done to humanize this character in a very short period of time, make him lovable, make the audience love him and know him like Elizabeth did. She loved her brother. So from the very beginning, um, you fall in love with him because he's just that charming. And we were blessed with an amazing actor, Jackson. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, he's the one. And it was not playing any type of caricature of being gay. It wasn't about him being homosexual. It was about him being a loved brother. And that's what we played. And there was a specific reason why all of the touching is very, because at that time you really couldn't be outwardly gay and not be really
Arrested.
ostracized.
Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah, and so all of those things, it was like in a glance, it was like in a look. We kept it very subtle. It was like in a subtle touch underneath the table. And it was like the look, it's all in nonverbal again, because it's the look of the father at the table when he just looks at them and you're like, he knows. And when we got into the scene, I think we had to earn loving John Zott to then feel the pain of losing him, like Elizabeth did. And it was interesting because the father character, another lovely actor whose name is John, it was very difficult for him. It was very difficult for him to play that moment where he couldn't feel. And I have actors in a room sobbing and wailing, and he's got to be like, hard and not feel. So he was fighting against the feeling, which we went with, because I think that's how the father was, you know. It's more interesting to fight against emotion. Just like in the protest, Asia was fighting as Harriet, she was fighting against wanting to cry, scream, whatever. She's holding it in and showing that strength. So it was more interesting to watch that performance because she was fighting against all the emotion, but the emotion was there, but she's fighting against it. Same thing with the father. You know, his son has just shot himself in the head. He has emotion. He's fighting against it. You know, he doesn't want to have those emotions, but it's there because he realizes he messed up. Like he's the reason why his child committed suicide, which is the worst thing that a parent could ever do, you know? So he was fighting against it and it was just there on the surface, but he was like pushing it back down. And when he walks out and goes to the car and just sits there and smokes a cigarette, it was like, that was a little bit of a release, but it could only be a little bit because if you crack it too much, then it's big and it's sobbing and it's all sorts of, which you can't do. And a lot of people don't, especially back in that time. It was the time of the Depression. You just
Yeah.
let a little out. But there's more to be said in that moment, in the feeling, in the silence says so much about him fighting that moment and just hearing the mother sob. And, you know, Elizabeth, that's the moment that Elizabeth just sunk inside of herself.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, and that, I mean, everything you said is that that's the humanizing thing, you know, and especially if they're coming from the silent generation, right? And that's what they are technically deemed, you know, as we're all given titles for the generations we grow up in. Um, it's just all, it's felt throughout it. And I don't know, because I haven't read the books, but to me, I almost saw the brother as a parental figure. You know, it was somebody that she looked up to and was kind of a
Yeah,
parent, you
yeah,
know, and so it just, as an audience, it just hurt even more. It had like, again, these layers of like, well, that was the one person she trusted to talk to and who
yes,
gave her straight answers, and now he's gone
yes,
too. So it was like an
yes.
extra layer of of things. So wow, it's just this episode itself is just incredibly wow, and the show is incredibly brilliant. So I have one more question on working with the DP, Zachary Gallagher. You know, because I think the director DP relationship is so important. It's kind of a marriage within itself. I would love to know, you know, what type of things do you look for in a DP, and what was great about working with Zachary, and because you also had two episodes, and I'm not too sure, but they might have been maybe blocked together, or if you could maybe chat a little bit about that, I would love to hear more.
Uh, when I look for a DP, it kind of depends on what project. I inherited Zach, so I was
Yeah,
blessed.
of course.
When I look for a DP, I look for style of storytelling and lighting mostly, and seeing what, you know, I usually, when I read, I get a vision. And I look for DPs that their kind of innate style kind of falls in with where this vision is going. But I also like to, it's also a relationship between the director and the DP. And I often say everybody doesn't speak Millicent. And so I try to find people that speak Millicent because Millicent is a very odd human being.
How would
And
you
when I find
define
other
that?
odd human
How
beings,
would you define? I would love to know how
because
you
I don't
define.
always finish sentences and I go, you know, the thing like the thing, and then you go like this and go over. And there's some people that go, yeah, yeah, you go like this and go over. I'm like, absolutely. And there's other people I say it and they're like, what in the hell is she talking about? I'm like, you have to like go on the ride with me. I'm like, do you see it? Like there'll be times when I'll go to a location, I'm like, I see it. Like I'll see everything come to life. And there's production designers and DPs who will stand next to me and totally see it too. And there's others that'll be like, what are you seeing? So I work with the ones who see what I see. So and Zach saw what I saw. Like we would see stuff and I would be like, do you see it? And he'd go, yeah, absolutely. I go, oh, okay. Like, let's go for it. And he was great. I loved working with Zach. You know, he was one of the people who was like, you know, let's keep the camera fluid. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I want to embrace that and keep it fluid. And he would really just play along. I was like, I have this crazy ass vision. He was like, what is it? I go, okay. And I use lots of references. Like I'll like find a picture and I'll go, this is the vision that I have. And he's like, okay, how do we make this happen and put it in? So he was really collaborative. And, you know, when I came up with crazy ideas, he wasn't like, Wilson, you're completely crazy. He's like, okay, let's figure out how to make this work. And I loved that spirit. And I really loved working with him. I try desperately to get him on everything I work on so that we can work together again. I look forward to the day that I can work with Zach again. But we really did map out so much stuff. We walked sets and I was like, well, we'll get low and like we'll creep along the floor and this means this. And he was like, oh yeah, you know.
Yeah, because you had a
Part of it
hallway
is,
shot that was like so it was low, it was nice. You had this hallway shot, and then you had this
oh
beautiful
yeah,
transition from like the car and then to when we picked back up on you know the actors and it the pacing and then even within the studio of like feeling like you are part of the camera team that is in the set, but then all of a sudden we felt like we were with, you know, Supper at Six and then presenting back at the audience. And it was just these transition and movements that I think as a viewer, you think you don't necessarily notice, but as a filmmaker, to make it feel that flawless or to feel like it's picked up and it's just like, yeah, I'm going on this show's journey. Like that is art, that is talent, that is why you are phenomenal and Emmy nominated and 100 and something I mean just incredible director and it's yes it's been an honor.
thank you. Thank you. Zach and I worked on that stuff together though. We did.
Yes,
And he made me not feel crazy. And he would like he really understood like I have this driving thing where I like to do really interesting visuals, but only if they support story and character. And he
yeah,
got that. He wasn't like sometimes you'll get DPs that are just like, but it's a cool shot. I'm like, I don't care if it's a cool shot. If it doesn't support story and character, let's find a cool shot that supports story and character. And it's all those things that you're feeling is why you were feeling them is because we were able to combine the two
yeah,
and you know keep it visually interesting but still always support story and character and that's kind of the key. That's what I hope to do and I love to try to you know collaborate with the DP, the AD also. I mean the movement of those cameras that's Chris, the first AD. I mean we all work together to like, well, how do we move the cameras so that you know when she turns all the cameras turn and she weaves her way through to the audience and it goes from a moment where we're filming her to now she's in the audience. That was all you know orchestrated. So it was a group effort and I love set is my happy place and I love the collaboration and I love a team that's totally supportive and you know when we work together it's like this wonderful wheel that just keeps moving and you get greatness.
yeah, here oh I I concur. I was like, I completely concur. And yeah, and it, gosh, an AD really also pulls everything together as well. I mean, especially when you have like 20 something locations and all of
Yeah.
your setups and keeping everything moving. But this show is just it was incredible to watch your work. It was incredible to watch your work and be able to chat with you today. And
Thank you.
I mean, I could talk with you forever, but I'm I know I can't. But if there's anything else you want to share with the audience about the show, please let us know. Um, I'm just trying to think too of like, you know, it's
It's
like
like
you
the
also had
gift
a
that
kid
keeps
and a
on
dog,
giving.
and like there was, you know,
Oh my God, the dog, Gus. I loved the dog. The dog was so funny, but like the dog was nutso. And like Bree would just be like, I'm just gonna keep acting. And the dog would like run off. And I was like, okay, we just gotta get a shot where we like can see the dog. And I'd hold my breath. I was like, please, Gus, go to where you need to go. Because 6:30 never had a leash. And it was like, can we please get the dog? And the trainer would like yell stuff. And like, you know, Bree's got dialogue. And it's like, dude, you cannot yell while she's acting. Just tried it. I tried to get him in a spot where the dog could see him and the dog would land. And once we got a shot with her and the dog, then I'm like, I'm above the dog. I'm like, oh my God. It was, and then the dog and Alice, but Alice is the greatest kid ever I've ever worked with. Alice, like our one of our first days of working together, like we were sitting, I was in the church and we were sitting together and she was like, I would hold this card like this. And she went into why her character would hold the card like this and where her character was emotionally in that moment that she was in the church talking to the pastor. And I was like, okay.
I can see
And what
that.
I instantly loved her because I was like, okay, this kid has like done her homework and she's made choices. And so we would have really, really great conversations. One of my best moments, there's two wonderful moments. One was when we were doing the diner scene, in between takes, Bree and Alice stayed in that booth and it was late and Alice must have had too much sugar because she was like, and she was spinning nonstop. And then Bree was spinning and the whole crew is like, they're lighting around them and they're laughing like two best friends. And we just kept them in the booth because we're like, just keep them in the booth. And they were doing everything around them. They're like, ah, and they would like crack up. And then everybody would start laughing because it was just so joyous to have the two of them just stay in there. It was one of the, I wish I could have recorded it with my eyes. I have like a still picture and I'm like, it just doesn't mean the same as that moment with them hysterically laughing in between every take and just never leaving because they just loved each other so much. And then one of the I think it was the very last scene that I shot with the two of them. It's the scene in Perot when Mad is sitting in Elizabeth's lap and they're finally talking about their pain, and Mad's talking about the pain of the loss of her
Oh, and the
father and
boxes
not
and
having
like,
a dad.
oh,
Yeah, yeah. And so they're sitting together before they go in and open the box. And Elizabeth saying that, she actually does, miss the love of her life, and that she hasn't been showing it, but she needs to talk about it and she needs to open up to her daughter. And so we did the wide and it was emotional, but it's wide. And then I did Bree's coverage first and Bree started to cry. And we were turning around at Alice and Alice came to me and she said, Bree was really crying. And I said, yeah, because her character's, having this epiphany about her life. And she's like talking to her daughter. And it's the first time she's revealed a layer of the onion to her daughter. And Alice goes, huh, those are real tears. I go, yeah, they were. And I said, well, your character is going through something also. And she goes, hmm. So then we go and we turn the cameras on here. And Alice was like tears. Like,
oh,
like I could do real tears too. And I was like, I love this kid. This kid is like the best kid ever. And she's still a kid. She still is natural as a kid, but she's an actress. And it was just like, and she's smart. And it was just, I was
and
like, okay,
so
Alice, And she's like, the tears just came down. She's like, I too can cry. My
it's
character is feeling pain also. It's like, okay.
she is so
So,
that dynamic is just so brilliant, the Mad and Elizabeth, and it's like, everything from her bossing like the librarian of like what she needs,
yes.
it's so great, and oh, that's wonderful to share that about her. Yeah, I mean, that mother-daughter relationship is so prevalent, and then also showing how to be a mother in such a respectable way is also present throughout the show, which is wonderful. She checks in with Mad and says, when she doesn't want to go to school, and she says, well, how about you try it and then I give you full permission. And it's like, wow, like, this little mini adult, and that in itself, and it's magic on screen. And I think that's also just, obviously brilliant casting, but as you said, the little girl is incredible, and I can't wait to see what she does next and where her career goes.
I can't wait either because Alice is amazing. I look forward to seeing where her star rises to.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you so much for today, and thank you for sharing everything that you have. Gosh, Lessons in Chemistry, I'm nominated for 10 Emmys. This is incredibly exciting. And especially for your episode, Poirot, episode 6. We will be cheering for you, and we can't wait.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been great.